Hiroshima, the beginning of the atomic bombing. August 1945. As the Pacific War neared its end, the Americans saw their chance. They launched a plan to make mushrooms grow on Japanese soil. But these were no ordinary mushrooms. They were weapons of mass destruction, unlike anything ever seen before on Earth. In mere seconds, a blinding flash of light appeared, followed by an intense wave of heat, as hot as the sun itself. A firestorm carrying deadly radiation swept over every living being. 2 cities were flattened. More than 100,000 people were burned alive instantly. But that was just the beginning. Let us now take a look at one of the most catastrophic and controversial events in all of modern history: the United States atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In 1941, a surprise attack by Japan on Pearl Harbor pushed the United States from a neutral nation into the chaos of World War II. As one of the world's top economic and military powers, the U.S. displayed overwhelming strength. Together with the Allied forces, they gradually broke the Axis alliance of Germany, Italy, and Japan. Japan suffered crushing defeats in the naval battles of Midway and Light. American air raids rained bombs down on Japanese cities. The Japanese military grew exhausted. At dawn on March 10, 1945, while millions of civilians still slept in wooden homes, more than 300 B-9 bombers dropped over 500,000 firebombs and napalm bombs onto Tokyo, unleashing a massive firestorm that killed about 100,000 people. From March to June 1945, the U.S. delivered blow after blow. Japan took heavy losses in the bloody Battle of Okinawa, the most brutal land battle in the Pacific. They lost their final defensive stronghold, with over 77,000 soldiers killed. By this point, Japan's fate was nearly sealed. Yet, while Germany had surrendered unconditionally in Europe, Japan still refused to give up in Asia. The Japanese Bushido spirit viewed death lightly and duty as weighty as a mountain. This belief ran deep through the samurai blood. Even after suffering major losses, the kamikaze suicide bombers continued to strike, taking out many Allied troops. Japan was betting on its stubbornness to wear down the superior U.S. forces. They believed that if they prolonged the war long enough, the U.S. would compromise, and Japan would gain favorable peace terms. But they were wrong. Japan had its suicide bombers, but America had something else: the atomic bomb. We can't talk about the atomic bomb without mentioning the billion-dollar Manhattan Project. In late 1938, German scientists discovered that bombarding uranium atoms could release an enormous amount of energy. This laid the foundation for creating a new type of weapon with unimaginable destructive power. A letter signed by famed physicist Albert Einstein was sent to U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Warnings of a nuclear chain reaction. Einstein feared that Nazi Germany would use this new discovery to create weapons capable of wiping out humanity. On September 17, 1942, after nearly 3 years of planning, the secret Manhattan Project was officially launched. The project's scientific director was physicist Robert Oppenheimer, later known as the father of the atomic bomb. The project's headquarters were located at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. Every detail, no matter how small, was kept under the strictest secrecy. Over 130,000 personnel were involved, including the world's top scientists, and a budget of $2 billion. 2 types of atomic bombs were created, one using enriched uranium, the other using plutonium. After 3 years of research, the team finally created what they believed to be a working nuclear weapon. On July 16, 1945, the world's first nuclear bomb, named Gadget, was transported to the Jornada del Muerto Desert, 35 miles southeast of Socorro, New Mexico, for testing. When detonated, Gadget released a force equivalent to 20,000 tons of TNT. A massive fireball rose, followed by a mushroom cloud 12 kilometers high. The result far exceeded expectations. This marked the dawn of nuclear weapons, a new chapter in human history. Less than a month later, the first atomic bomb would be dropped on Hiroshima. Before delivering this final blow, President Harry Truman issued the Potsdam Declaration in July 1945, warning Japan of dire consequences if they refused to surrender. But Japan showed no urgency. The Imperial Army mobilized massive numbers of troops to defend the homeland. Meanwhile, Japanese politicians sought a peace deal with the Soviet Union as a mediator. This infuriated Truman. During WWII, Germany had been defeated by the Soviet Red Army. But for the Americans, no clear victory had been achieved. Only by forcing unconditional surrender could the U.S. claim credit in the world's biggest war. And even if the U.S. won, it had already suffered heavy losses fighting Japan. If the war dragged on, those losses would multiply exponentially. Estimates suggested that a direct invasion of Japan could cost over 1 million American lives. But above all, the U.S. had not forgotten the humiliation of December 7th, 1941, the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. While some generals opposed using the bomb, Truman reminded them of the Pearl Harbor tragedy. When you fight a beast, you must fight like a beast. Washington believed that the bomb could kill two birds with one stone, end the war quickly, and send a warning to Moscow. America now possessed the ultimate weapon. For Japanese cities were chosen as targets: Kyoto, a major cultural and industrial center; Hiroshima, a key military base with large munitions stockpiles; Yokohama, home to many military factories; and Kakura, Japan's biggest weapons depot. Kyoto was initially the top choice. It wasn't just an industrial center, but also the cultural, scientific, and technical heart of Japan. If bombed, it could potentially erase Japanese civilization. But U.S. Secretary of War Henry Stimson had a soft spot for Kyoto. He and his wife had honeymooned there. So Kyoto was removed from the list. Kakura and Nagasaki took its place. On July 31, 1945, Little Boy, the uranium bomb, was declared ready. The mission was initially scheduled for August 1st, but was delayed due to a storm over Japan. General Curtis LeMay later confirmed the bomb would be dropped on August 6, 1945. Little Boy measured 3 meters long, 71 centimeters in diameter, and weighed 4,000 kilograms. It contained 64 kilograms of uranium-235, designed to detonate when two uranium cores collided, and reached critical mass. At noon on August 5th on Tinian Island, the military rolled the bomb out of the warehouse. Tens of pilots stood around, tensely observing. They had never seen a weapon like this, a steel-encased, tail-finned object that looked like a giant vent fan. After final checks, the nose section was sealed. This ensured internal stability and optimal explosion conditions. Little Boy was loaded onto a special truck and transported to Northfield Air Base, 2,400 kilometers from mainland Japan. That afternoon, the bomb bay of the B-29 opened. Little Boy was hoisted up using a hydraulic lift. According to the plan, 7 B-29s would join the mission: 3 weather observers, 1 blast measurement aircraft, 1 film crew, 1 backup, and the bomber named Enola Gay. Pilot Paul Tibbets was in charge. At midnight, the crews gathered for a final briefing. Only a few pilots knew the full mission. At 2:45 a.m., Enola Gay took off. At 3 a.m., bomb expert William Sterling Parsons climbed into the bomb bay. He removed the green safety plug and replaced it with a red one. The bomb was now armed. Skies were clear, with confirmation from Manhattan Project Command. Hiroshima was chosen as the final target. At 6:30 a.m., Enola Gay climbed to 31,000 feet. The sun was just rising in Hiroshima. It was a beautiful day. At 7 a.m., Hiroshima's radar detected the American planes. Sirens wailed, but seeing only a few planes, the Japanese military chose not to scramble fighters to conserve fuel and resources. After months of U.S. bombings, the public had grown used to seeing enemy planes. Most civilians didn't panic. They didn't rush to shelters. Thousands of 13-year-old schoolgirls marched into the city to help rebuild. No one knew that in just a few minutes, sunlight would turn into black rain, filled with deadly radiation. At 8:15 a.m., the Boeing B-29 Enola Gay, piloted by Colonel Paul Tibbets and Captain Robert Lewis, dropped the bomb. The bay doors opened. 44 seconds later, a blinding flash lit the sky. The B-29 shook violently. A giant mushroom cloud swallowed Hiroshima. Even the pilots were horrified by what they saw. At 550 meters above the ground, the blast unleashed the force of 15,000 tons of TNT. Everything within 1.6 kilometers was obliterated. The firestorm and radiation engulfed every living thing. Hiroshima had 145,000 residents at the time. The heat was unimaginable. Air temperatures rose to thousands of degrees. At ground zero, temperatures reached 1,000 C. 90% of buildings were destroyed. 70,000 people died instantly. Some were vaporized, leaving only shadows burned into walls. Streets and vehicles melted. The city's entire structure collapsed. Every clock stopped at 8:15 a.m., the exact moment of the blast. Survivors suffered from radiation burns and didn't yet know they were contaminated. Thousands more died in the following days, suffering from hair loss, blood oozing from their noses, mouths, and ears. It is estimated that over 140,000 people were killed by the Hiroshima bomb, and the number kept rising. 2 hours after the attack, American families gathered around radios to hear President Truman's statement from USS Augusta. "We have harnessed the basic power of the universe. We are now prepared to destroy Japanese military industries more rapidly and more completely than ever seen before on Earth." He warned that if Japan did not surrender, more rain of fire would fall. Later, during a press conference aboard the USS Augusta, Truman told reporters, "The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have now been repaid from the air, many times over." On August 8, 1945, millions of leaflets were dropped over 47 Japanese cities. The leaflets described the atomic bomb's power, equivalent to 2,000 regular bombs dropped at once. They urged citizens to petition the emperor to end the war. But Japan's leaders ignored the warnings. Japan still had 5 million troops, 10,000 aircraft, more than half were kamikazes, and enough fuel for 7 more months. To force surrender, the US decided to drop a second bomb. This one was codenamed Fat Man. It measured 3.3 meters in length, 1.5 meters in diameter, and weighed 4,700 kilograms. Unlike Little Boy, Fat Man used plutonium-239 and was designed with an implosion system. When detonated, the explosives would compress the plutonium core until it reached critical mass. Fat Man was originally scheduled for August 11th, but due to bad weather, the date was moved up to August 9th. The bomb was carefully guarded and stored in an air-conditioned warehouse with rubber flooring to prevent accidental ignition. On the evening of August 8th, Fat Man was loaded onto the B-29 boxcar at Northfield Base on Tinian Island. The flight departed at night to reach Japan on time. Boxcar's crew included 12 members, led by Major Charles Sweeney, age 25, and LT, Colonel Frederick Ashworth, who was in charge of arming the bomb. The first target was Kakura, 170 kilometers southwest of Hiroshima, home to one of Japan's largest weapons depots and surrounded by factories. Nagasaki was the backup target. Unlike the first bombing, the second mission faced multiple problems. The plutonium bomb's triggering system was far more complex. When the plane reached Kakura, it was met with heavy smoke from a firebombing 2 days earlier that had targeted a steel plant in Yawata. For 50 minutes, the pilots made 3 bombing runs, but failed to confirm the target. Clouds and smoke covered 70% of the area. Boxcar consumed large amounts of fuel and came under intense anti-aircraft fire. With no success, the crew decided to head to the backup target, Nagasaki. Nagasaki was a major naval port and home to Mitsubishi factories, producing torpedoes and weapons. The city was set at the end of a long bay, surrounded by hills. Residential areas clustered in the Urakami Valley, 3 kilometers north of the city center. At the time, Nagasaki had about 263,000 people, including 140,000 civilians, 9,000 soldiers, and 400 prisoners of war. At 7:50 a.m., Japanese radar detected U.S. aircraft. Sirens sounded, but fell silent at 8:30. Believing it was only reconnaissance, the military did not launch fighters. Nagasaki, like Kakura, was covered by clouds, making visibility difficult. At the last moment, Bombardier Captain Kermit Behan spotted a break in the clouds. At exactly 11:01 a.m. Japan time, Fat Man was dropped. It fell for 43 seconds, exploding at 500 meters above ground. This blast was even more powerful than Hiroshima. It released energy equal to 21,000 tons of TNT. Temperatures reached 4,000 C, with winds of 1,000 kilometers per hour. The mushroom cloud rose to 18.2 kilometers. Although the bomb missed its target by 3.2 kilometers, its destruction was massive. 40,000 people died instantly. 2/3 of Nagasaki was leveled. The Urakami Valley was erased. Bodies were incinerated, bones piled on the ground. Survivors wandered through ruins. Their burns were worse than death. Hair and skin charred, flesh stuck to limbs like seaweed. Among 7,500 workers at Mitsubishi's munition plant, including students and regular laborers, 6,200 died. Between 17,000 to 22,000 people at other factories also perished. Nagasaki became a giant graveyard. At the time, nothing was known about radiation. Doctors blamed the symptoms on dysentery. Survivors searched for loved ones. In the rubble, only two absorbed deadly radiation. By early 1946, 80,000 people had died from the Nagasaki bombing. 5 years later, that number rose to 140,000, mostly from leukemia and cancer. Combined, over 400,000 people were killed by the atomic bombings. On August 15, 1945, Japan surrendered unconditionally. World War II was over. While the bombs hastened the war's end, they remain controversial. Some see them as crimes against humanity, marking the start of a nuclear arms race. Others defend the decision, arguing it freed millions from occupation and ended the deadliest conflict in history. After the tragedy, the story of 12-year-old Sadako Sasaki, who suffered radiation-induced leukemia and folded 1,000 paper cranes, hoping to live, inspired a nation. Cranes arrived from across Japan, but the miracle never came. Sadako passed away in 1958. A peace monument was built in her honor, with the words, "This is our cry, this is our prayer, peace in the world."